and welcome to episode 142 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and we are about a week and a half away from the draft now. We're going to have one more episode after this before the draft where we preview it. Going to be a lot of fun. Definitely a very lot of intrigue for this draft. I don't feel like I know who's going to go number one. I'm not sure you do. I know two different teams who are not number one have kind of come out strongly and said who their number one pick is, and those are different, two different picks. Neither of those two people were the actual number one pick in the draft, and neither of those three names are the guy who was kind of the consensus 4 months ago, first year player draft number one. There's really a lot of directions Alex could go with number one, huh?
Yeah, and I will say I think last year we all thought there was kind of a consensus number one, and he went against the grain on that pick. I think this year there's two pretty clear number one names, and it's kind of like what type of direction does he want to go in? Um, I don't think he could go wrong with either pick. I think I know what pick I would make for his team, but I think there are a couple of different options, and even beyond who I think are the top two candidates, like there's a number of other options who I think would be worthy to be the number one overall pick in most drafts. So um it's going to be really interesting. I think this might be our most interesting draft ever. Like I'm trying to think of a comparable draft. I think last year at the top might be the closest, but I think this year might have more depth than that class did, and that was a pretty good class. So, especially with the international signees, I think that's what really puts this class over the top. So, I'm incredibly excited, and I know you are, especially with you holding two first round picks. I don't really have a stake in this, but I'm certainly going to enjoy watching it all shake out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is, I agree, the best draft class that we've ever seen. Yeah, with some of the international guys, we're definitely gonna. It's gonna be a great time. We're gonna have a great winner of the Kyler Murray Award for Best Draft Moment this year. Looking forward to naming that on our post-draft podcast. But yeah, just a lot of names. We're going to break them all down next week. Who we think the best guys are, who we think teams will go with. Um, that's going to be a ton of fun. I know I've got two picks in the first round at 8 and 9. There are a few names I'm thinking I could hopefully get with those picks. But speaking of picks of mine, I um, cut Kahlil Watson yesterday.
Yeah, I think that one is definitely worth talking about. It did kind of start a little bit of an ad drop frenzy, but Kahlil Watson, famously of the whole Kahlil Watson Jordan Lawler debate at three. For those of you who don't remember, but you really should remember, Cam announced that he was going to take Jordan Lawler on accident, but he actually meant to say Kahlil Watson. We all said at the time, watch Jordan Lawler end up like having a Hall of Fame career and Kahlil Watson being an absolute bust. And the Kahlil Watson being an absolute bust has kind of come true. Um, he had the talent. He was just kind of a knucklehead, and if I remember correctly, the numbers started to decline as well. Um,
Yes, they're actually slightly better this year than they were, or I guess 2023 than they were in the previous couple of years. I
but they're
just
still
kind
not
of
good.
Yeah, it's not great. And just kind of, Watson, I kind of had the realization I've got a few picks this upcoming draft. Watson's not going to survive draft day for me. Clegg put out a new list, and there's a guy that I want to add before Sahil takes him. I got to make this move now.
Yeah, it helps that I've been dying over the past week and have not been on top of my game, but I will be getting back on top of my game shortly. But yeah, I mean, I think it was time. I think it can be hard to know when to pull the plug on prospects sometimes. We've certainly seen prospects who were highly drafted kind of have a bad debut year or year and a half and then really turn it around quickly. I'm thinking of how Jackson Jobe was passed around last offseason a bit, and now looks like one of the top pitching prospects in the game, like some people expected him to. He was taken 3 picks after you took Watson, actually. But in Watson's case, I'm not really seeing where that's coming from. So, yeah, I think this was the right decision to just kind of rip off the Band-Aid. That has my full support.
Yeah, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think maybe my biggest weakness as an owner is knowing when to pull the plug on guys.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes, yes. You still own Jared Kelenic, so yes.
I will be talking a little bit about Kalnick later in this episode, actually, not to spoil what we're doing, but
How
I
many
think
episodes do we talk about Jared Kelenic? Like, I feel like he comes up like at least every other episode.
I think he comes up a lot, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, yeah, I don't know when to pull the plug on guys, and I'm worried maybe what if I pulled the plug too early on Watson? I think it's probably his time though. And that kind of he's just kind of the face of an absolute disaster class of a draft by me in 2022. I had 4 picks. Um the first pick I took Kahlil Watson, third overall. I could have had Jordan Lawler. Second round, I kind of felt like, a lot of things were falling into place for me with some of the picks. Say, uh, you know, Christian Vaquero going very early, James Triantos going about eight or nine picks earlier than I thought he would. Carson Williams kind of being way down on my board and going earlier, though he's turned out to be a great pick. And I was like, yes, I will be able to take Sal Frelick and Matt McLean with my 2 picks, and I'm going to be very happy. And then, of course, they went with the very next 2 picks right before mine, which was a bummer. I still felt very happy though. I was very high on Jay Allen and Sam Bachman. I took both of them. They both have been since cut by me, which was very disappointing. Um, so that was kind of a bummer, especially since I could have the very next 2 picks, Trey Sweeney and Gavin Williams, would have looked very good on my team. Or even I could have taken Colson Montgomery, who would have been a better pick than really either of those guys. Um, yeah, Connor's White Sox um, uh, picking spring into action. Connor has taken, by the way, this past year, 2023 was the first year in which he did not take a White Sox pick. And every year in which a White Sox was taken, Connor has taken a White Sox. So that's just kind of a fun little thing here. But yeah, absolute disaster of a draft class saved only um, by James Wood in the late second round. Not quite making up for it, but say if I had taken James Wood third overall and Kahlil Watson uh, at the end of the second round, this would have felt a lot um, more manageable than the way it actually shook out.
For the record, I told you from the beginning taking Sam Bachman over Gavin Williams was an absolute mistake. So,
Yeah, I'm not
I'm
sure how I
gonna
feel about my pitching scouting after that one. I was worried, oh, Gavin Williams, people only like him because he's in the Cleveland development system, but Sam Bachman's the actual better prospect. People only like Williams better because he's in a good system. And yeah, it turns out that was very wrong.
where I will say I do agree with the general notion of, hey, like go pick the guy that you think is more talented on the pitching side, but like the landing spot is important. Uh, I think I think it does make a tangible difference.
Yeah, and I think that was a lesson I learned there.
Yeah,
Um,
that is true. No, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
um, but yeah, speaking of, and here's a segue. Speaking of redrafting people and changing where people have been drafted. Our segment for tonight, and this is one that I kind of thought of just a couple days ago on a whim, and I'm very excited about. We are going to be redrafting the entire 2019 prospect draft.
Yes, no, great idea by you, Cam. For context, so Cam chats me on Saturday, at 3:26 p.m. He's like, segment idea, redrafting the 2019 prospect draft. And within an hour, I was sitting on a plane while this happened. I was like, okay, like cool, like go do it. Within an hour, he had put together a whole draft. So I was genuinely impressed. Uh, we kind of tweaked it a little bit right before starting to record, but I think you and I are pretty in lockstep for the most part um, of how this redraft would have gone. Um, One thing I'll add too is that we took into account who the owner is that was making these picks. So these aren't necessarily R1 through 36 in order of how we would do it, as much as here's who we think would go 1 through 36 based on who is making the picks if this draft actually happened today.
Exactly. Yeah, and we'll see that kind of early on with one of the top few picks.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, this was a lot of fun, I gotta say, and especially, with it us coming up on the 5-year anniversary of that draft, um, and that being our first draft, we really had no idea what we were doing. We were clearly not taking it very seriously. Taking guys because they had funny names. Even in the second round, Blaze Alexander, or Durbin Feltman. Imagine wasting a second round pick on a funny name guy. Especially now that we know how valuable second rounders can be.
It, it,
It's
it's funny.
mm,
It's funny you didn't even mention Kyler Murray. Like
oh,
that's
yeah,
the poster child of hey, taking a player because of a funny name. Uh,
God. Yeah.
yeah. Although I will say, I can't imagine Max and Teo having taken Blaze Alexander as a meme. Although maybe I'm wrong. Like
I don't know.
Max feels too serious for that.
I don't know. I feel like he did. He was an 11th round draft pick in real life.
Oh shit. Okay. I take that back. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's definitely fuck it. Let's take someone because he has a fun name. Oh, oh, speaking of fun names, I mean Brock Deathrage, like
Rock Deathridge. How about other Mesa?
other Mesa, yeah.
Do we none of those guys have made our redraft. But even like the picks you're taking seriously, the first round, we did not do very well on. It was a tough draft. This draft, especially, a lot of the best players were like second, third, sixth, eighth rounders. So
Yeah.
this was a lot of fun to dig through, and the redraft is very, very different than the actual draft.
Yes. The absolutely. And I think you're gonna find that there's a couple of lessons I think that come out of this draft about this redraft about how these drafts function in real life. But we'll see this as we dig in here. Cam, do we want to dig in with the first pick?
Yeah, we'll start with the first pick and then we'll kind of speed it up a little bit. Pick number one. This was a guy in real life. He was taken in the first round of the real life major league draft, but he was not taken at all in our prospect draft. It's Tristan Casas. This was kind of a tricky one. Yeah, this is Connor taking Tristan Casas, by the way, instead of Nick Madrigal. Um, this was a really tough one. There were a lot of interesting pitchers that we could have gone here. I just think Casas, he's still 23. He put together a really solid hitting season, 24 homers and only 429 at bats. He's got the high on base percentage. Drafting a first baseman first overall is a little not what I'm most excited about, although Connor has done that before with Andrew Vaughn. I think. I think he'd be very happy with Costas first.
Yeah, I personally disagree with this pick, but I thought it was interesting, so I didn't really push back too much on it. I think there are more established major leaguers that are left on the board that I would have taken because I'm more confident in what their outcome is going to be. I will say Casas kind of had an interesting year in the sense that he wasn't great in the first half, but the metrics said he should have performed a lot better. And then in the second half, the metrics were shit, but he performed really well. So I think he's kind of somewhere in the middle of that, and I do think he's gonna be a little bit streaky. Um, and I don't know exactly how he's gonna end up as a player. Like I think there is a potential that he is really solid and that he is worthy of the number one overall pick. But I also do think there's a potential for him to like be an above average first baseman that like is a real asset, but like I'd probably want him more in the middle of this first round as opposed to wanting him number one overall. So um I think he's an interesting player, but I don't think I'm ready to declare him the number one player in this draft.
That's fair, and it's really tough. This 5 years from now, we redrafted this redraft. Casas could be at the back of the first round. So who knows?
Yeah.
Moving on to pick number two, though, EBO took Casey Mize in real life. We are going to give them a different Tiger starting pitcher, Tarek Skubal. He was taken um, in the major league draft. He was taken all the way down in the ninth round. I think, and I don't think he's the second best player on this board, but I think this is who Zane would take with that second pick if he had to do it all over again. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, I don't really have any other comments about that. I think Scooble took a big jump from a skills perspective this past year. The K rate jumped a lot, and he is getting a lot of hype going into the season. I mean, I'm seeing people calling him a top 10 fantasy starting pitcher already for next year. I don't know if I'm ready to go that high, but an 11.43 K per nine, a 1.57 walk per nine, 0.45 homer per nine, and a 280 ERA with an even two FIP is fantastic. The reason I'm not as high on him is because that happened in 80 and a third innings after he pitched 117 and two thirds the year before. Um, and like I want to see a full season of him before I'm ready to completely buy in. But from a pure talent perspective, I get why you would take him at number two right now, even if EVO wasn't a Tigers team.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I kind of agree with your take on this. Let's do the next four picks all at once. This is four straight pitchers. We're giving me Shane McClanahan at number three. Max and Teo, we're giving them Logan Gilbert at number four. Those guys were taken 36th and 30 in our 2019 draft, respectively. Then Daniel and Alex get Grayson Rodriguez at five, and Zane and Max, their second pick of the first round, get Kyle Bradish at six. That's two Orioles pitchers who were not taken in our draft, although Grayson was taken 11th overall in the major league draft. And I kind of remember there being some discussion like, hey, this guy was taken 11th overall in the major league draft, and we didn't take him in this. But yeah, we're giving him to Daniel and Alex at five and Kyle Bradish to EBO at six.
Yeah, I think this is the correct order that these pitchers should go in. I think McClanahan, given his body of work, like I get the injury, I think probably at this moment would have been my pick to go number one overall, over
Yeah,
Kyle.
see, it's funny. I had him number one overall originally, and then I felt no, Sahil's not going to like this. I got to move him down.
No, oh, that's funny. But no. I mean, I think from a pure body of work, uh, and pure upside, I think he is number one. I mean, I think he is the most dominant pitcher on this list when healthy.
Want to
Um,
swap him and Casas right now? Do a uh live on air? No, we can't do that because people are gonna be confused when they listen back.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. You know what? That's part of how a draft goes, though, right? Like you'll think afterwards, huh? Maybe I regret how this went. Um,
yeah, we just did a whole segment about me regretting my pick, so I
but
guess yeah, let's
it,
leave
it,
it.
exactly. And like I think there are real risks to taking a pitcher early, whereas going with a hitter at the top is often a right move. And McClanahan's hurt right now. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, while I think he is number one from a talent perspective, and if I am drafting this from a dynasty perspective, I would absolutely probably have him on top. I mean, I still think there's some real questions. Um, But yeah, I mean, I'm really high on McClanahan. Gilbert, I don't think has the upside that Grayson has to pick after him, but I think Gilbert has a lot of stability, and I feel like I know what I'm going to get out of him, and it's going to be really damn good. So I like him going a little ahead of Grayson right now, but that could easily change in the middle of the season. And I do think there's a legitimate argument to have Grayson above Gilbert. I love Grayson Rodriguez. Like I think he's going to be an ace when it's all said and done. He already showed that he could be an ace towards the end of last year. Ditto with Kyle Bradish, although I think Grayson's upside has me taking him above Bradish. Um, but I do think everything Bradish did last year is legitimate, and like he is definitely going to be the Orioles opening day starter. He is fantastic. Um, I think this is a real good group of pitchers, and I mean, I think some of our listeners might debate the order that these four go, and I mean, I wouldn't fault anybody for putting any of these pitchers in a different order. And you could even lump Scooble into that as well. I think it's a really fascinating group of pitchers.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, yeah, let's do number seven alone. He was the number seven pick in our original draft. It's Nico Horner. He's someone I owned briefly. I maybe gave up on him a little bit early, although he's the type of guy I think maybe a better real life player than fantasy player. I He's also kind of the fantasy profile that I don't love, where all of his value is kind of tied up in his steals. He's got a decent on base, nothing spectacular. Certainly better than like an Alberto Mondesi type. So that's maybe all his value being tied up in steals a little bit unfair. He's a decent middle infielder. He's got kind of a low ceiling because I can't imagine he's ever going to hit 20 home runs in a season. He only hit 27 doubles too, but he was worth 5 WAR according to Baseball Reference. So great real life player. He's going to get a lot of playing time. He's going to steal some bases. We'll see if his on base percentage in the future is uh, uh, kind of more like it was in 2023 or more like it was in 2022.
Yeah, here's what I'll say about Horner. Like, power's out there, right? I mean, his power actually declined from last year. He had one less homer in like 171 more plate appearances. That's not very good. But where he really got his value was a spike in stolen bases from the new rules. I mean, he had 20 in 2022, which was fine. But he had 43 in 2023. I think a lot of his utility is dependent on him keeping up that stolen base number. And I think even if that stolen base number dips and it's, say, he gets 30 stolen bases next year, like the runs numbers should still be pretty solid, but I don't feel as confident about that. A 346 OBP was nice last year, but even if he gets to like that 327 OBP that he had in 2022, I'm gonna feel less impressed with it. The last thing I'll say is, you know, he's had WRC pluses the last 2 years of 106 and 22 and 102 and 23. And I get that, like, we're not a WRC plus league. That doesn't matter, right? But to your point, he is basically a league average hitter. So if that speed starts to decline a bit, I mean, it's not like he's just going to be such an elite hitter that he's going to be able to overcome that. So I do think there's some risk. I do think there's a couple names that we're going to discuss here in a second that I would maybe consider taking over him because of that.
And it's funny. I was fully prepared to move him down, and then you kind of talked me out of it. But yeah, he's a fine hitter. He's a fine player, certainly. Let's move on. Yeah, pick number 8, Joe Ryan. We're giving him to Anthony. Pretty solid middle of the road starter. I like him a lot. Pick number 9 is the first guy to actually move down in the draft. Nolan Gorman, who was taken fourth by Max and Teo. We're giving him to Matt and Matt, who are now Yuki and Yuki, giving him to them at ninth. We kind of like the power there. Um, Pick number 10, we're giving Connor Francisco Alvarez, one of the top international prospects of the window. Now he's uh, Mets catcher of the future, with Connor kind of having an older Sal Perez. Figured he'd be a good pick for him. So that's picks 8 through 10.
Yeah, I'd say I'd lump these three together with Horner in terms of like I think there's a teardrop after the Bradish pick. And I think all of these guys are very solid. I think you could argue that Joe Ryan belongs in that group of starters up top there. Although he did not have as strong of a year in 23. He had a 4.51 ERA and a 4.13 FIP. He started off the season really well and then got hurt, but like the peripherals look pretty solid, albeit with a high home run rate. So if he can get the home run rate down and stay healthy, like I think he could take that next step, but I get why we don't consider him kind of in that top tier of pitchers there. Um, Gorman has too high of a strikeout rate for me, although like his 27 homers and 7 steals this year were very solid. The OBP because of the high K rate was not as high as I would have liked to have seen. I do think he's going to be a solid bat for years to come, but I do think it comes to some limitations, and I don't think he's ever going to become an elite bat. Francisco Alvarez, I think you could argue is the most upside of the players in this group. Although he is a catcher, and while he was pretty solid in his debut last year, there is more that, I would like to see from him before, really being able to meaningfully move him up the board. I do think he top 3 to 5 catcher upside, but and he showed that with 25 home runs and only 423 plate appearances, right? Like that's awesome. But a 284 OBP and a 209 batting average with that isn't exactly the most inspiring.
Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, Alvarez, yeah, top catcher, taken in this draft. Meanwhile, I had taken Joey Bart at number 3. Spoiler, Joey Bart will not be in this redraft. I hate to say it. Yeah, neither will Nick Madrigal, actually. So spoiler there. Moving on now, pick number 11 is Clayton and Ryan, later Clayton and Jake, and later Jake's team. We gave them Noel Marte, the first player who, yeah, the first guy who hasn't really done a ton of the majors yet, to be taken here. Although he's one of the front runners for Rookie of the Year in 2024. So Noel Marte. Then I've got back-to-back picks, and there's kind of a tier break between them, we think. But let's, yeah, list them. Yeah, I took Lars Nootbaar at 12, which is where I took Jared Kelenic originally. So Lars Nootbaar at 12, I think he's, yeah, a solid outfielder. In the real life major league draft, he was taken by the Cardinals in all the way down in the 8th round. So yeah, big jump up to 12 here. And then at 13, we've got the first guy who has not yet debuted in the majors, Kevin Alcantara. I figured, my team, especially at that point, was big on the prospect train. Let's give me a young guy, a top 50 prospect as we're recording. Um, and yeah, someone who can kind of hopefully grow into a winning pick here.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add on Marte. I think he's really solid. I think the Reds are going to give him quite a bit of playing time this year. I like the ballpark, and I think that's a solid pick. Although it's possible he goes through some struggles as he adjusts to the majors. Newt Bar, from a kind of performance perspective, is not too different from some of the guys below here. Um, but I think the upside is higher. Like I thought he was going to show some more last year, and he didn't quite reach that. I believe he dealt with some injury issues, but I think he is going to reach that this year. So I do think he's a tier above. Um, Alcantara feels a little high for me, especially when there's other guys who have debuted who have showed some success. Um, if Alcantara was more like a top 25, 30 prospect, like, yeah, I get it. I don't have him quite as high. And I think there's a couple names, even some going about 10 picks lower that I would like to have more than him, but or the one guy going about 10 picks lower, not a bunch, but I do get why you like him, and it was your pick, so I didn't I told Cam off air my reservations about the pick, but I told him it was his pick, so I wasn't gonna like be like we need to change this. So I want to be on record.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, put that on the record. So that's the top 13. We're, yeah, second pick of round two. This is EBO's pick. Originally taking Kyler Murray with this pick. We're giving them Alec Boehm, who was their original number six overall pick. So kind of moving him down to 14 here. He's a solid third baseman. Not if he's your best third baseman on your roster, that's not really where you want to be, but he's my second best third baseman, and I'm fine with that. He's a perfectly rosterable guy. He'll hit some doubles, hit the occasional home run, have a decent on base percentage. Someone who can certainly be upgraded as you type Mariners hot stove into the baseball chat. Um, oh God, Michael Chivas to the Mariners. But yes, that's Alec Boehm. Putting him 14th. Pick number 15, we are giving Connor Drew Rasmussen, someone that you have owned for a little while. Decent pitcher, dealing with the injuries. We'll see how he bounces back.
Are you sure you're not thinking of
Um,
strings?
oh, I maybe am thinking of Jeffrey Springs.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yuki.
have have you
It's,
ever owned Drew Rasmussen?
I mean, it's possible I streamed him, but like n nothing for like a long sustained period of time. No.
Okay, gotcha. Well, Rasmussen, yeah, fantastic 2022. Injury shortened 2023, but still a solid pitcher. He's 28. He's cheap. He's on the Rays. I like him. Pick number 16, and this is a guy I think I might have ranked too high, Logan O'Hoppe. Um, but we're giving him to Yuki, and he's the best catcher left on the board. Um, so Logan O'Hoppe, he's arguably the best catcher left on the board, actually. I'm not sure if I agree that he is, but he's kind of I don't know. People seem to like him. I don't fully get it, but certainly he would be the top catcher on a lot of boards at that point. So we gave him to
Also,
the team that would become Yuki's team.
yeah, I'll say about that too. I mean, if you're thinking about, Yuki's team and maybe being in a little bit of a rebuild, getting a younger catcher who's just debuting, could be a smarter play. I think when we're looking at team context, it's not just, oh, EBO takes Tigers, it's Tariq Skubal, That's also kind of considering some of the other factors for other teams as well.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Pick number 17, we're giving Eric Jonathan India. So two picks lower than he was taken in the inaugural or in our real version of the draft. He's a guy 2 years ago would have he could have been top 6 or 7, but his stock has maybe taken a slight hit the last couple of years. We'll see what happens with him. Um, and yeah, picks 18, 19, and we can put a pause here to kind of recap. But yeah, 18, we're giving Clayton and Ryan Stephen Kwan. He's a guy that Jake has liked. I think he's a fun pick for Jake at 18. And then pick 19, AJ and Max we'll give them Cal Raleigh, the third catcher off the board.
I think we kind of reached a point where a lot of it comes down to preference and a lot of it comes down to team fit. I mean, I'm so happy with Yuki, but like I think Bohm, solid player, like decent third base option, nothing like super special, but I think he gets the job done. I think Drew Rasmussen is pretty solid. The injury kind of sucks, but he'll be back next year. And Connor definitely could use some younger pitching. So I think that that's a pretty solid fit for him. India at 17. I get he kind of came on strong with the rookie of the year and then hasn't looked quite as good since. I wonder if he needs a trade out of Cincinnati at this point with some of the younger guys debuting, them signing in Candelario, for him to really be able to flourish. But I do think from a talent perspective, he's a solid player, and if he performs like he does in his rookie of the year, then he could easily move up this list up into the back half of the first round, I think. I'm not a big Kwong guy. I think it's kind of fun to put him on Jake's team here because he really helped lead Jake to his first championship. Um, I do think he's a better real life player than fantasy player, kind of in that Nico Horner kind of sense, but he doesn't really provide much of the speed. So I think that's why you're seeing the 11 pick difference between them. And I think Cal Raleigh at 19, you could argue, is a better pick than Ohapi at 16. I do think Yuki is not as high on Cal Raleigh. It sounds like he's had opportunities to go out and get him or keep him on his roster, but hasn't quite done that. I am worried that Raleigh isn't really capable of getting on base at a level that one would be comfortable with in an OBP league. Although the power is nice for the catcher position. Um, if we're talking about a real life fit, he is kind of a weird fit for Andrew having Will Smith and Jonah Heim already on his roster, but that could force a trade of one of them and help him, open up some space elsewhere. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's tough to do team fit, and something like that. Try to balance that with best player available. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and
let's move.
I will say I do think he's clearly the best player. Maybe not clearly. There's one other player later that I think is better, but I do think he is clearly the best player on the board, other than maybe that one player who I'll reveal in a second, on the board at 19. So.
Yeah, so yeah, Raleigh at 19. Number 20, we're going Aurelvis Martinez. He's a guy who's stock. I mean, he was super young. He was taken 33rd in our um original draft by you, actually. That was a pretty good pick by you. Unlike some other teams, you did not punt the third round. Um uh so we gave you so you took him in real life. We're giving him moving him up to 20th for Daniel and Alex. 21, Max and Teo. Um, Now Alex and Zach. We're giving them Yusei Kikuchi. I took him 13th overall. Ended up cutting him by the end of the first season. He's kind of become a decent enough starting pitcher.
Sure.
He goes 21st tier. 22, and I think this is the guy you've been mentioning earlier, James Outman, kind of had an interesting season. We're giving him uh, to the team that is now Jake's team at 22nd. 23rd, and let's cut this chunk off here. Jeremy Pena going to Ruth, Vic, and Nick with the 23rd pick. Another guy who was not taken, who was passed over in the real life draft.
Uh, yeah, I will say okay, so breaking these names down, Martinez is a guy whose stock kind of started out high. It dropped a lot, and now it's kind of coming back up a bit. I'm still not totally seeing it. Not not in a way where I think he's going to be a super impact major leaguer, and because of that, I wouldn't have drafted him this high. But if you're thinking of a team like Daniel and Matt who are shooting for upside, that's probably the type of play that makes sense for them. Although I probably just would have given them Outman. They went and traded for Outman. They like him, and he's shown something in the majors. Outman started off hot and ended the season pretty hot. He wasn't great in the middle. I get he's going to bat at the bottom of the lineup and probably be more of a strong side platoon guy than an everyday player. But he's young and has shown a bit with the bat. So I think I could. He was a guy earlier who I like Like if you told me Kevin Alcantara or James Outman, I think I'd take James Outman and wouldn't think twice about it. Uh, because I think they have similar upsides, but Outman's actually shown it in the majors. So I think I'm a bit higher on Outman than you are. Um, I'm definitely higher on him than Kikuchi. I think Kikuchi is just kind of a streamer starting pitcher. Um, the talent is tantalizing. I get that. He's put it together in spring training so many years and looked like he's going to break out, but never actually does it in season. And I still subscribe to that. I don't think he's gonna like suddenly post an ace like season coming out of the rotation for what he's still at Toronto, right? Um
Yeah.
yeah. And then I'm just not a Jeremy Pena guy. I was never a Jeremy Pena guy, even when he like came up and was hitting really well his rookie year. He kind of stonewalled last year, and I think he's one of those like good defense. He'll hit decent enough like to hold on to the job when he's cheap, but like he doesn't strike me as a guy who's really going to be part of the hour or anything. But at this point of the draft, kind of given the rookie season that he had, this is the type of gamble I'd take kind of at the turn 23rd pick. So I think it's a fine pick, but I personally just don't really like him.
Sounds good. Um, but yes, let's move on here. Final pick of the second round was Eric's pick. We're giving him Brady Singer. We're kind of starting to get into, like with Pena too, kind of starting to get into the guys who aren't stars, but they're just kind of interesting guys. So Singer 24, 25. This is your pick. We are giving you Aaron Ashby as, I guess, you picked up Aaron Ashby, traded him away immediately. And then talked about how great he was. So I guess you're just kind of putting your money where your mouth is here. He's maybe still the most interesting guy left, though. Pick 26, we're giving Ruth Vic Jaron Duran. And then pick number 27, we're giving me Brendan Donovan. Um, yeah, Duran and Donovan, both guys that I owned this past year. Uh, Donovan, particularly, he's a guy, 2023 was a bit of a lost year, but I think he's got a lot of upside and flexibility. Um, yeah, so that's pick 27 here. I took Bryce Terang with that pick in the rail draft.
Yeah. Solid group of three picks here, or four picks. Singer, my concern with him is that he's a two-pitch pitcher. It worked for him in 22. I was admittedly really high on him going into the 23 season, and I thought he was going to be able to sustain his level of success. It didn't quite happen, especially early in the season. He rebounded a bit as the season went on, but it was still too inconsistent. But I like gambling and seeing if he can kind of figure out how to get back to that 22 level this late in the draft. Ditto with Aaron Ashby. Like Aaron Ashby, like showed some flashes. I want to say it was in 22 and then was injured basically all of last season. Um, but the Brewers, they got rid of Brandon Woodruff. Corbin Burns is probably on the way out. Like there is going to be a hole in that rotation that needs to be filled, or not just a hole, multiple holes. And I think he could be part of the answer. So I think he's a solid pick, and then also kind of for the meme with me hyping him up. Uh, I still don't know what to make of Jaron Duran. I think he's going to be a decent major league player. I don't know if he's going to be a regular or more of a platoon guy. Um, I I don't know if he really. I think he made some strides last year, but I can't tell if it's like a actual substantive change that's really going to lead to him taking off, or if this is just kind of the baseline that he needed to actually stick in the major leagues. And I don't know, but I think it's a fine gamble here. Brendan Donovan, I think was headed towards a much better season than he had, but he got hurt. There's an elbow injury. Um, I again kind of this late in the draft. Don't think he's necessarily the highest upside guy, but I think he's going to be a really solid player who plays a number of positions. I do think he's safer than some of the names that we discussed, maybe with in the last 4 or 5 picks. Albeit maybe with slightly less upside. But I think it's a solid pick by you, and I know he's been one of your guys, so I like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Moving on down to the third round, a couple upside guys. We're giving Max and Teo Taj Bradley. And then we're giving Daniel and Alex Marco Luciano, who's kind of had his stock rise and fall. It's a little bit down right now. He was taken 11th actually, in the original draft, and it looked like a good pick for a while. His stock is down now, though. At number 30, it's finally time for Jared Kelnick to go. We're giving him to AJ and Max. That is Andrew's team now, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jared Kelnick, I feel like he kind of fits here. The rest of the guys are just kind of fringy. Kelnick has more upside, I would say, than any of them. 31st, we're giving Clayton and Jake Ryan Jeffers, the fourth catcher off the board, not the last catcher, to go though. Jeffers had a decent season. He's getting a little bit of hype. Um, and then 32nd, we'll stop here. 32nd, we're giving Anthony Josiah Gray. He was an all-star somehow at interesting season. Young pitcher Anthony might be interested in.
Yeah, I think Rowley and Luciano are solid prospects. I'm not the highest on either of them, but I think they're both solid gambles. I think you could argue Kalanick's tricky because, like, I personally don't believe in him, right? I mean, I think the strikeout rate is way, like, I can't get past that and see how he's going to become a good player. Although I do think Atlanta is a good change of scenery for him. There's no pressure on him to be the guy. He's not playing in the shadow of Julio Rodriguez anymore as like the outfielder in Seattle that actually made it. Um, but he is going to be batting lower in the lineup, and I do think that the leash might be a little bit shorter. Um, Atlanta doesn't necessarily have anything, kind of attached to him. They didn't give up a ton to get him other than taking on a little bit of money. So, if he's not performing come June or July, they can make him a fourth outfielder and, go and trade for somebody to fill his spot. So, um, yeah, it's a decent gamble here, but I'm not that high on him. I think Jeffers is solid as a catching option. I think he's going to get some more playing time this year, especially because there's been rumblings the Twins are trying to get rid of Christian Vasquez. Although if they do keep Vasquez, his defense is superior to Jeffers, so that could stun his playing time a little bit. But I think there's definitely a talented bat in there, and I like that pick here. Ditto with Josiah Gray. I mean, I get it. Like he's probably not really an all-star caliber pitcher. Every team needs to have an all-star, and the surface numbers look good. The whip's a little too high for my liking, and I think it's going to push up the ERA higher than it was this year. He's still a young pitcher who's very talented. He was one of the leaders of the in that Max Scherzer, Trey Turner package that the Nationals got back for a reason. And if he's able to kind of get some of his issues in check, I believe he has a home run problem. You know, I think he could really take off and move up this list pretty quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And yes, moving on, we got four picks left. We gave you Yennier Cano at 33. He was an international guy in that class. Oriole, you owned him in our fantasy. It's sidebar. I'm really struggling with saying when to say real life in this because real life is still fantasy baseball as opposed to real Major League Baseball. You did not own Yennier Cano in real life. You owned him in the real fantasy version, not this fantasy redraft of fantasy. So just If you've noticed me struggling with syntax here, I am um Yenir Cano, yes. 33. 34, Diego Cartaya, finally the fifth catcher off the board. We're giving him to AJ and Max. 35, EBO gets Casey Mize. They get him 33 picks later than they actually took him. But they get him at pick 35. And lastly, with the final pick, we are giving Eric Alec Thomas. Um, you had said something off air about him kind of having a good second half. The numbers don't actually really uh, show that, but he's an interesting guy. I don't particularly like him, but it's kind of getting thin. It's him or Jake McCarthy at this point.
Yeah, I don't think McCarthy's going to do much of anything. Although he just got engaged to one of my high school classmates, so congrats to him. That's cool. But I think Thomas. So it wasn't a second half of the regular season as much as he had a really good playoffs. I think he had like 4 home runs in the playoffs. Um, I think the comp I see for him kind of at the top end here is kind of like the Royals version of Benintendi. So not what the Red Sox thought they were going to get, but also not like the shit that the White Sox got last year. Um, and I think that type of player is somebody who fits nicely in kind of the mid to back of somebody's like outfield in this league. And he is still young, so there is still room to take another step. So I, I think when you're looking at some of the guys who are taken in the third round here, it's kind of about identifying who's like your guy, quote unquote, and seeing how they develop. Like somebody might really want to gamble on Kellenic like you do, or you really like Brendan Donovan. He's kind of been your dude. Like, I think if I had one of these picks in the third round, Alec Thomas might be that guy who I'm like, you know what, I'm going to stake my flag in him and on him and gamble on him. So, that being said, you did give me Yennier Cano. I do like that pick. If you're thinking about the type of team that I'm building, right, one of the things I need is, bullpen arms. I have a really good rotation. I have a really good lineup. I did lose Felix Bautista to injury, and I think Yennier Cano is a really solid arm. Now, I don't think he's quite as good as he started the season out to be. The K rate isn't quite there. He's more of a ground ball guy, which I don't love out of the bullpen. And the reason I did recently cut him in our league is because the Orioles signed Craig Kimbrell to be the closer. But he is a guy I really like. He's going to rack up a lot of holds, and that would be a good fit for my roster. Diego Cartaya's kind of had some of the shine and come off of him. I think he's more of a bigger name than a prospect at this point. I think Dalton Rushing has passed him in the Dodgers farm system as a top catcher. They do also have Will Smith there. I'm not sure if they're going to re-sign him necessarily. He is coming up on free agency pretty soon here. But I do think it's a decent gamble to slate in the draft, see if he kind of retain or regain some of that uh kind of prospect stardom that he did have. And I mean, EBO taking Casey Mize is not really much of a surprise. I mean, I've made it abundantly clear what I think of Casey Mize. I think he's kind of a back of the rotation starter who can't stay healthy. The K rate's not there in a way that makes me think he can kind of take the next step in a way that like Scooble has. But like I think he could carve out a decent career as a back of the rotation starter, and um you know he's one of EBO's guys, and yeah, like I think it's a good pick for them.
Yeah, no, certainly. So that's our redraft. We will put the um full results. I'll put it in the video description down below. So you can kind of look this over, see how you feel. Just a couple honorable mentions here. Luis Matos almost made the cut.
He was
For Yeah, he was the last guy cut. Daniel Lynch is maybe interesting. Maybe a Tigers fan would have taken Parker Meadows somewhere here. Michael Grove, I uh, picked him as one of my saves guys for the future. He was eligible for this draft. um, Kyle Isbell, Taryn Vavra. Um,
Taryn Vavra doesn't even deserve to be an honorable mention, and that hurts me to say that, but no, no.
yeah, so that's basically it. Maybe you like Cody Hewer. Maybe you like Tyler McGill, maybe Steven Wilson, um, Bennett Souza. These are all just kind of, it gets kind of, there's, yeah, JP France was in this draft, so maybe he's one of the next guys. But it's funny how, yeah, 30, if you had to pick 37 or 38 names, it would have gotten very hard very suddenly.
Yeah,
Penn Murphy, if we had 4 rounds, Penn Murphy probably would have been a fourth round pick.
other names I'll throw out here. I mean, Nick Madrigal and Joey Bart didn't really turn out to be anything, but at least they're in the majors. Ryan Weathers, maybe somebody would have taken. Uh, Cole Winn.
Well, I'm just realizing now there's a name I missed.
Uh,
Bo Naylor probably would have been in the second round had I seen him. Um,
oh, absolutely, Bo Naylor. Yeah, it
Listen,
really.
I put this together in an hour. Bo Naylor, yeah,
Yeah. Bo
should have
Naylor.
been on here. Apologies to Bo Naylor. Maybe we can do
Yes.
that sort of thing where we um, say, hey, Connor gets an extra pick because we lost one of his picks in the shuffle. Maybe there's an extra first rounder or an extra second rounder. Someone uses that to take Bo Naylor.
I think Bo Naylor should have been the second catcher off the board after Francisco Alvarez. I am really high on Bo Naylor, and there is a reason I went in and traded for him. But uh, yeah, was Josiah Gray drafted by the Reds? Oh, he was. Okay.
He was in the Matt Kemp trade, or he was in the Homer Bailey trade, let's call it that.
Gotcha. Other players, Brennan Davis, I know has been a pretty decent prospect at different points. Let's see. Drew Rom made his debut with the Orioles, or not with the Orioles, with the Cardinals after being traded from the Orioles in a Jack Flaherty deal. Maybe somebody sees Major League ready pitcher and decides to gamble on him. Addison Barger is kind of a decent prospect with the Blue Jays. I can see somebody taking a chance on him. Cody Morris has always been a guy who's pretty solid. He's older now. He's like 27, but he just got traded to the Yankees, and maybe they give him a chance finally. I know he's dealt with some injuries. Uh, this one might be somebody who would have been drafted for sure. Um, Reese Olson. I think I probably would have taken him over Casey Mize. Uh,
That's that's probably fair. I don't
Rand,
know. It's yeah, we left it up to our
yeah,
um our discretion of what we think Zane might have done. But yeah, Reese Olson, that's fair. It
JP,
took me a second to remember who Reese Olson was.
yeah,
We've been in hockey mode for a little while, but yeah,
you're
Reese
good.
Olson, yeah, that's not a bad pick.
Yeah, JP France, I think probably would have gone based off the year he had last year. Although I'm not crying over us not saying him because I don't think what he did is particularly sustainable. Um, so I'm fine with that. And then let me just double check here for funsies. Xavier Edwards is no longer really much of a prospect. Jackson Kowar, not really either. Um, Matthew Liberator, I probably would make my honorable mentions list.
Yeah, I think that's certainly reasonable.
Yeah, I don't think he needs to be drafted, but like I probably, especially because like I don't think the Cardinals have rotation room for him anymore. But I certainly think he'll get some chances this year because their rotation is ancient. And there's bound to be some injuries or they want to give some rest to somebody. Um, Last guy I'll shout out is Shea Patterson, was drafted in the
Hey,
draft.
all right.
And Um, I can't tell if he actually signed. It says that he signed. That doesn't sound right. Um, this is also Wikipedia, so okay. So the Rangers retain his rights until 2024. So
Hmm?
uh, and so he did sign a contract with them. It was a 6-year contract with a 25,000 signing bonus.
How about that?
Yeah. Uh, yeah, Patterson has not played baseball since his junior year of high school. And what is he doing right now? He is with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the CFL. So,
Hey, good for him. I'll be rooting for him.
yeah. Page not found when you click on him. That's not good.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. There is a page for other players. I don't think he played last year. Uh,
That's a shame.
yeah, wouldn't it be something if he did come back and played football, but or baseball? But yeah, it doesn't. There was a time I thought he was actually going to be drafted and like maybe be something.
Yeah, he was, I mean, certainly not the worst Michigan quarterback in recent memory.
No, he was probably
I
ex-
mean,
especially that 2018 season. Like the 2019 he was pretty bad, but 2018 he was actually pretty solid.
yeah, he was certainly fine. Uh, yeah, that's something we didn't mention. I'm not sure if that's worth mentioning on this podcast, but Michigan,
Uh,
pretty good.
we kind of buried the lead. Yeah. Yeah, we won an Natty.
You did, and yeah, that's yeah, the M in podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. That M stands for Michigan.
That M does stand for Michigan. Thank you for reminding us of that, Cam. I think all need a reminder sometimes of what that M stands for.
We
Um,
do, and yeah, we've
yes,
um yeah, yeah, things are great in that corner.
yes. And hopefully the league can be great as well. In in its corner.
But all right, anything else we want to talk about here? We've done the draft. The draft is over. We only missed one obvious name due to my incompetence. And yeah, next week we'll be back here with with a full 2024 draft preview. It's 2024. This is our first recording of 2024. Um, yeah, what do you say? Any last words, Sahil?
I just want to say it's funny that the one guy you missed is the one guy I have not shut up about to you this offseason. Like I've talked to you a lot about Bo Naylor.
You've talked a lot about Bonell. There's a lot of guys you talk about.
That's true. That's true. I have been sending you a lot of catcher rankings lately, I feel like though. But
You have been sending a lot of catch rankings. You kind of are in agreement with me though that people are underrating Wilson Contreras.
oh yes, 100%. Although I'm now seeing rankings where he's more appropriately ranked, so I think it's kind of a mix. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean the MLB Network ranking put him at 6, and I feel like that's fine. Um,
yeah, but I also
but
don't
the
trust.
the rest of they has Alejandro Kirk at 7, so that list is wrong for other reasons. But
Yeah, well the MLB Network lists are garbage. MLB.com lists are garbage. Yeah.
most fantasy lists are garbage too. It's all garbage one way or the other, to be fair.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's confirmation bias. I think is really what people are seeking on these lists. But yeah, I think he's a top five catcher. I mean, he's probably five in top five, but yeah, I think he's a top five catcher.
And hey, yeah, he was a top 5 catcher this past year. If he has one more year as a top 5 catcher, then I'll feel like I've done a great job with this deal.
I already feel like I did a great job. So no matter what else happens in this deal. Um,
And
but Yeah, no, we are excited to be back. I know Cam and I have had a bit of a hiatus with the podcast. I think we recorded once in between like early November and now, but I know my schedule lightens up quite a bit. I was doing a ton of traveling and had a ton of holiday parties and had my busy time at work. Uh, I am now back in Charlotte for the foreseeable future. So, I think we are hoping to start to be back on a more normal recording schedule. So,
Hmm.
I think you should be hearing more of us. I won't speak for Cam. I mean, he is the one doing the editing, so obviously he is the one more directly in control of the schedule. But I think it's safe to say you'll be hearing more of us.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Especially next week, we got our draft preview. After that, we got our draft recap, and then just like that, we've got trivia to do, we got awards to do, and then we got power rankings. We'll probably get another interview or two, and then just like that, it's going to be the regular season.
Yeah, no, there's a lot we still need to jam pack in this off season, but it's going to be a ton of fun. Um, Yeah, I still can't believe we haven't done awards yet. We really need to get on that one. It is January. We voted on these awards in theory in like October. So,
And you voted on them when?
I have not. I still need to get Eric to open them back up or figure out the link, what's wrong with it. But we keep saying we're going to chat him about it and then never do. So,
All right, but we'll get on that. Point is, we got a very busy rest of the off season ahead, and we'll be there with you for it. Yeah, I know I felt very invested in hockey this year. I know you have. I know a lot of us have. And yeah, it's um gonna be a great rest of the off season. And if that's it, yeah, I will see you next week.
yeah, yeah. Until then, we'll see you next week.
I want a complete redo, maybe change my name. Report the losses, grab the claim. It's a shame, it's such a shame. We're pissing away our time, cause we're pissing away these beers. No monumental moment ever came from saying, come on, dude, just take one more shot. Try to forget that your bones will dismantle and the dreams you had, they'll collide with time. You're unrequited love for life.
This podcast is good.